This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London. All of our podcasts are available from our website, www.sas.ac.uk.
Our panel, we're looking at a really fascinating set of extracts from a novel by the French writer Geneviève Brisac, introduced by Julie. Now, Julie, interestingly enough, chose this extract with great difficulty, she told us, because she found it hard to locate a maternal narrative about work, which I think is itself a matter of, extreme import. Because although she said that she could locate a number of French narratives about maternal ambivalence, there were very few in which a work narrative was actually drawn into these. And I think that, perhaps the silencing of narratives of the working mother is something that we need to look at, because we're not really seeing them, in many different areas, not just in literature. But anyway, to introduce the book very briefly, it's an incredibly disturbing narrative, to me anyway, and I think to the rest of the group. It's entitled in English, Losing Eugenio. Now, the French title translates, Julie told us, as Weekend of Hunting the Mother, Weekend de Chasse à la Mer, which apparently also puns on the sea, because it is set at the point of it culminates with a seaside weekend in which a working mother of a single child, who's divorced, living on her own with her child, basically loses custody following a sort of ambush by a friend and her ex-husband, who have decided that she is not coping with motherhood, and also apparently wish to liberate her from motherhood, according to Julie, who's read the whole novel. She's a former painter, and the friend apparently wishes to bring her back to her artistic self. That's right, isn't it? And restore freedom to her. So really an astonishingly disturbing and quite punitive narrative. Julie says that she's also been in touch with the writer previous to this, and said that apparently the writer did not wish to, in any sense, to portray this as a punitive narrative, which I find very interesting, because it's clearly open to interpretation as a punitive narrative. And reminds me of other sort of 1980s narratives, in which bad mothers are very profoundly punished, normally more in films, I think. Like it's The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. Remember, the mother who goes out to work will be deprived of her child by an evil carer, and that sort of narrative. Okay, so she's obviously intending to critique mother blaming, mother hunting in this narrative. What's very lost in the translation of the title is the subjectivity of the mother. And I think this brings up for us, one of the questions that Victoria has set for us is cross-cultural comparisons. And it interests me, and I don't know, I can't make a generalisation about French versus British culture, but in British culture we have this sentimentalisation of the child, the placing of the child in front of the mother, blocking out the image of the mother very much. I don't know if this is different in France, and Julia can comment on this, but in the English version, we have a picture of a little boy on the front of the cover, and the title Losing Eugenio. And obviously the loss of the child being such a sort of common, metaphor for failed motherhood in Britain as well. I think this is extremely important. Okay, so I just wanted I think for the rest of the short time that we have, I will go over I tried to target some of the questions Victoria asked and see what we can bring out of the narrative here. I located this very much as an 80s narrative. Obviously it is contemporary, but perhaps not completely current, so I didn't talk about austerity and precarity, but no doubt this will come up. The one thing that was relevant to precarity is that the mother here, Nook, is in a very much a women's job. She works in, the Library for Education and Research on Children. It's a women-only working environment. It is not a temporary job as far as we know, but it's very much, there's a sense of it as a slightly infantilizing environment. They call each other girls, but at the same time, she also sees work as a refuge, apparently also from her child. There's a very interesting scene where Eugenio phones her at work, and she's horrified. Well, she's not horrified, but she's irritated, isn't she? She starts to prickle, she starts to sweat, she wants him off the phone. He's asking a rather interesting question about the Queen's lost the keys to the Palace of Westminster, and says, is this sort of metaphor of the loss of home, and impliedly, Mummy, when are you coming home? and she wants rid of him. And she mentions at the end of the extract that this is her nest, her anchor, her security, possibly the one place on earth where I was expected and where I had my own chair forever. I think it's interesting in the context of precarity that it's in fact the child that she loses rather than the job in this narrative. And possibly, we're looking at a reversal of that in the current climate. Okay, so the impact on non-parents of maternal rights and provisions of the workplace, not really clear here, because every woman here also, and that's intriguing, is a single mother. Every mother mentioned in the extract is a single mother. Now, the current debates on mothering and employment, it has tons to say about that as far as I can tell. Workers' escape, workers' friendship, identity in this service ethic, which is very feminine in this extract. Betrayal by the friend at the end, attempting to bring the mother away from her maternal identity back into an artistic identity, which is something else that clashes both with work and childbearing. But obviously the "you can't have it all" message, which I hate that phrase, but it's written all over this book, isn't it? Absolutely written all over it. Okay, so, but it's the friend who says you can't have it all, and make sure that she doesn't. So you can see this betrayal. Okay, so when we look at literary techniques and effects employed to convey meaning, as I haven't read the French version, I don't feel particularly able to comment on that, and we didn't look at it too much, but I think that the translation issues that I've mentioned have a lot to do with that, the translation of the title. There's one point as well where on the second page of the extract, at the end of the first extract, on the second page, the boss of the office says, "Clotilde, Nuke, you're minding the shop." Julie tells us that in French that is actually "you're minding the house." So you can see that there is a loss there of a potentially interesting metaphor. And it would require a knowledge of both languages, which obviously I don't have in order to go through that, but Julie may be able to say more. Okay. You get also the sense of maternal work intruding into work, the need to talk to and calm Eugenio while she is at work. Lisa having written on maternal interruptibility, we mentioned, and the stresses that this causes to maternal subjects. There's also, I don't know if anyone's read Naomi Stadlen. I thought that's quite a useful reference here, because Stadlen talks about the work of mothering as being instant interruptibility. And it's very clear here that when women come to work for a rest and also create time for themselves in this extract, the women are coming to work for their own chair. The receptionist on the first page is doing her makeup at work. And most of the group thought that this was a way of sort of claiming space for herself, personal space to look after herself at work, which she doesn't have because she has a job and she hasn't got a car and she's divorced and is a single parent. So, I'm just looking at what else I need to... I've already gone on a bit too much here. Julie raised the important topic of mothering and time. The restrictions on space are also restrictions on time, very clearly. There's a lot of mention of having time around Christmas. The child is left alone on Boxing Day because the mother has to go back to work, etc. Time at work is time lost with the child. The loss of creative space is very clear, and then the sort of re-imposition of creative space by personal betrayal, the tearing apart of the mother between different roles. And I thought that overall, that for me, the main thing that came across is that this book's basically talking, as Lisa just said, really, about the imposition on women of personal solutions to these intractable political problems of work, gender, social organisation. So, if feminism originally established that, the personal was political, we're looking also at the political being also personal. This kind of reversal, this inability to separate the issues completely, and this being lived out often in great suffering by protagonists. So I wondered, anyone else in the panel in our group want to add anything to that?
That was great. I think we captured all the main points there. One of the other questions I asked Geneviève, Brisac, in a brief email just before today's workshop was, why did she think it was so difficult to locate a meaty text or extract within a novel where mothers talked about their work, and she wasn't sure. She said it was an interesting question, but perhaps it was to do with lack of role models.
also, I suppose, people are writing about motherhood, if they're as writers, or their work. Always, some of them also teach. But that doesn't matter. Annie, I know, for instance, who is a teacher, there's not a lot about her. There's little bits in her work, aren't there? But not a lot about the conditions of employment. So.